Okay. Good evening, everyone. Can I have a share my screen so that I can just show my. So this is an initiative we have started with my adult colleagues for a interventional forum in which we can discuss and debate, learn and improve our skills by learning from our colleagues, juniors and seniors. So it's named as a Structural and Congenital Interventional Procedure Simplified as a SCIPS. It is named as Series 1, Episode.
Edwin, you're frozen. We can't see you. I mean, we can't. Nothing's moving at your end. We are not audible, and you're hung up as such.
Yeah. I think the network snapped.
Yeah. Network snap.
Yeah.
Maybe he needs to.
Yeah, he's coming. He's back.
You can hear me?
Yeah,
We can hear you. We can hear you. Please go ahead, Doctor.
So basically, we'll continue with, we thought of one or two areas we'll cover in one each session, in which we have cases being presented, one or two cases, of which one I would prefer to have some complications, so that I personally feel that the complications tend to teach you much. Like most of the successful people would have a lot of successes, they show it very well. Everybody want to show it in the telecast it. But our failures and complications that teach us more, because we ponder over it, we go through it, why we went wrong. So I feel that the complications tend to teach much more than our successes, so that others will not repeat it, learn from our own mistakes. And with that, I think we'll slowly, I just request the moderator to stick to the timings, because 6 minutes each, but otherwise it will not go on. We want more discussions and involvement from the other delegates here. And then each delegate, any doubt, any concern, you can put in the chat box so that we will discuss it in more detail. And we have many eminent speakers today. We have 4 speakers and presenters and 2 panelists. The 2 panelists, one is Dr. Parag from PGI, is a cardiology trained from Maldi Institute and now associate person, Postgraduate Institute of Chandigarh, and is an exceptional interventionist. And Dr. Tawfiq is from Bangladesh National Heart Foundation, one of the best known interventionists in the country in Bangladesh. And we have 4 speakers, in which I'm going doing one case. Dr. Munish Toma was my colleague and escort for a short period. She did a FNB from Escorts Institute, then later on joined Medanta, and now she is in teaching hospital in Meerut. She is a good teacher and a good interventionist. And the last 2 speakers, I don't think they need any introduction. Dr. Jay Ranganath from Jayadeva Institute, the well-known all over
This
India.
meeting is being recorded.
And Dr. Nagesh Rao absolutely doesn't need any intervention in this part of the world. And then finally, I will let Dr. Praful Kelkar, one of the senior most professor and exceptional interventionist in both coronary and structural interventions. I will ask him to take over and continue with the sessions. Thank you all.
Well, thank you, Edwin, and thank you, CVRS, led by the team of, we have a treasurer from the CVRS, Jimmy George also here, and my good friends Mohanan and Jabir for having invited me to this symposium, which promises to be exciting, I guess, given that I myself, by training, am an adult cardiologist, but with a lot of interest in pediatric cardiology, simply because, as also what we heard about the first speaker, Munish being a pediatric cardiologist. But I am told that out here, the viewers are predominantly going to be adult cardiologists, and it's going to be a good marriage of pediatric and adult cardiology. Why? Because interventional cardiology is just not about opening them stenosed valves or stenosed arteries. We have, as one of the CVRS member who just got interviewed as being a CTO specialist, and we were just discussing before coming live that the CTO might be required to perforate pulmonary valves for that matter. And I remember a long time ago, sometime I gave a talk on the synchrony between pediatric and adult hardware in interventions. And it is, of course, talking about it's not just about opening up stenosed valves and all unwanted communications. The pediatric cardiologists have a lot of opportunities to close unwanted communications, and moving beyond left to right shunts at the atrial, ventricular, and the PDA, that is to say ASD, VSDs, and PDAs. Today, the vistas have expanded, and we can close rare defects also. And by rare defects, given our population being so large, each one of us have seen those rare defects on also in not only in our cardiology training, but as we improve in the interventional business, you become a referral center and start seeing more and more of these rare defects. And two such rare defects today have been picked, especially with adult cardiologists in mind, also because though congenital in nature, they do tend to present in adulthood, as also there are opportunities to close them along with the pediatric cardiologist's help. So without wasting much time, let's first go to the first defect, that is the ruptured sinus of Valsalva aneurysm, which is invariably a left to right shunt, very often presents as a catastrophic presentation, or rather a subacute presentation. Within a fortnight or so, the patient is in florid right heart failure. And we've had opportunities to even present them during live case demonstrations. That's because a ruptured sinus of Valsalva aneurysm has come, you have imaged him and all that. And you can actually, if you are lucky, you can present it also, demonstrate it also during live transmissions. Mm-hmm. So for ladies first, and as an opening batsman, we have Munish Tomar, a pediatric cardiologist of great repute from Meerut today, having trained at Fortis, as what was also Edwin said. So Munish, can you share your screen and show us what exciting stuff you want to present?
Should I go ahead?
Yeah. Sure. Manish, you can proceed.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you, Edwin. Thank you, organizer committee, to give me the opportunity. And Dr. Praful very well said, these difficult structural interventions are like adult and pediatric mix. So we can't separate it from each other. These are the communication, acquired, congenital, whatever. We all do as a team. So we always involve adult guy whenever we see these difficult communications. So hardware are common and very important that to decide for the success of these procedures. So this is a 30-year-old male patient presented with a short history of acute abdominal pain, epigastric basically, dyspnea, pediatric edema, increased recorded activity. There was a very rapid progression over 2-3 weeks. When he presented, he was in NYHA class 3 with tachypnea, tachycardia, with wide pulse pressure, raised jugular venous pressure, hyperdynamic precordium, and there was a trill. Very loud continuous murmur, just heard in the left parasternal, fifth intercostal space. Radiating all over the precordium, and there was a tender hepatomegaly. So very classical case of something acute has happened to the patient in this scenario. ECG, there was sinus tachycardia, and on chest X-ray, there was cardiomegaly with RA enlargement and increased pulmonary. After initial stabilization, patient was taken for the echocardiography, and this is the 4-chamber view showing normal contractility, and there is a wind shock type of thing with communication into the right atrium. The same thing was confirmed by the color Doppler, which is showing a flow from left side to right side, basically towards the right atrium. The parasternal short axis view showing a communication from between the right coronary cusp to right atrium. So again, you can see the wind shock mechanism there, plus flow left to right. It was a continuous flow with a gradient of around 60/20 across that communication. Continuous flow very well, beautifully seen by the color and mode of the RSOB. No aortic regurgitation, and the size of this communication on the aortic side is a side by which we decide about the, if we are going for the catheter intervention, it's a side we decide about the size of the device. So it was around 11 millimeter. There was pure effusion as expected in the sick patient. The treatment option point patient, initial medical stabilization by diuretics, by propped up nursing, and then the closer. So closer surgical, we all know it is a well-established treatment option for the structural defects. But catheter intervention with the conventional use is there for last more than 3 decades for ASD, PTA, VSD, AV fistulas, and non-conventional uses, especially for last 15-20 years, have started for RSOB, paravalvular leak, restricted AP window. So these are the things. With that things in mind, we discuss with the family about whether we go for the surgery or the device, and family give consent for the device closure of the RSOB. The challenge for us, for every interventionist, is you need to perfect the arch to match the long-term surgical outcome. This is very important. So a perfect execution of the procedure is important. You need to have your case selection has to be good, ideal device, minimal or no side effect, and no residual leak. So this is what family expects from you. So when you are deciding, especially in these difficult cases, understanding of the anatomy of the procedure is very important. So echocardiography play a very crucial role to define the defects, with the transthoracic or T, all depend on how your windows are, which sinus is involved, where it is opening, what is the size of communication, valve registration, because mitral, aortic and TR tricuspid are there, so need to be looked carefully, and all valves should be checked carefully. Relation to the coronary artery, because most commonalities arise from the right sinus, so relation is very important here. Association with the other restricted heart defect. You need to rule out anything which requires surgery or anything which requires catheter intervention. If you require catheter intervention, you can plan in the same sitting or in the staged procedure. But detailed anatomy and the hemodynamics are must to know when you take a patient for the catheter intervention. Your colleague, your staff, you need to have a well-informed surgical team when you plan for any catheter interventions. Need to have a very good understanding of your hardware, how you profile the defect, how you cross it, which wire, which snare, which sheet, which device. So everything should be in your should be available with you. Under local or general anesthesia, this is the usual protocol. Majority of our cases we did under local anesthesia with transthoracic echocardiography. IV antibiotic cover we provide for 24 hours, 8-hourly Reflin. Heparin for adult patient 5,000 units after taking the venous, after taking the vascular access. So venous by 6 and femoral artery by 5 French. Initially we take that. You need to have a right heart study before any structure closure of any communication, and aortic root injection to define your defect. For the right, for communication arising from the right sinus, this is the LAV which gives the best information. For non-coronary, this is the RAV which defines the defect and the site of opening best. Left sinus, we have not done any, so these are the 2 combinations we have done. Approach closure of the defects. This was a CAT data of the patient. You can see the SV saturation is very low, means very low cardiac output patient was having. There was a huge step up from SVC to right atrium, so total was 86-30%. RA pressure, you can see mean of 25, high PA wedge, moderate pulmonary arterial hypertension, and a very wide pulse pressure of the aortic. Then comes the procedure, so aortic root angio. After echo, this is the thing you need to understand carefully. So aortic root angio showing there is a communication from right coronary first. Right coronary artery is quite far from the communication. You cross the defect by the hooking the communication by right coronary catheter with the help of the Terumo wire. This is the exchange 35 Terumo wire. And when you cross, you parked it either in the pulmonary artery or into the SVC or into the IVC. Wherever you are comfortable, you can park it, and then snare. By snare, make an arteriovenous loop. Over that arteriovenous loop, you take the amplage sheet into the arch or towards the isthmus. Then you take your decided device. So we take 2 to 4 millimeter bigger than the communication. It was an 11 millimeter defect. We took 12 by 16. ADO1 to close the communication. And you take the device into the ascending aorta, release the aortic disc in the ascending aorta, then come back towards your site of rupture. You feel a tug. There you check by the aortic root injection again, where your disc is. Then you place the device where you need. Release the right side of the disc, again check by the angio. You need to have a very careful watch on aortic valve and the right coronary artery. When you are satisfied, then release it. And have a post-release aortic root injection showing a beautiful sitting of the device. There's no aortic regurgitation. Right coronary sitting very far, and the things went well for this patient. This is the aortic trace. So you can see here, this is the second one is pre-device closure. Aortic diastolic was 50, and immediately after closure, it went to 80. So that is the beauty of capital intervention for these communication. Immediately you see the hemodynamic effect of the closure in these patients. Have to have echo machine there, so check by echocardiography, a good, very well sitting device. There's no aortic ligation, no pericardial effusion, ventricular contractility, so everything went well. We keep these patients on dual antiplatelet for 3 months and echo screen for 6 months. This is as a protocol. We keep all the patients for of RSOB. In short, a review of literature. It is a rare defect. Less than 1% of cardiac surgeries involve sinus or valsalva repair. It is more common in Asian, more common in male. So majority Asian males are the victim here to have RSOB. Average age of presentation is 39, though it is documented in newborn also.
Yes.
And average survival is
not been heard.
4 years only. So this is a serious disease, fatal disease, need a timely intervention for that. This is a classification for the RSOB. So mainly from right coronary cusp, then non-coronary, and very rarely from left coronary. Site of rupture is mainly into the right ventricle, then right atrium, and then other surrounding structure is open. The VSD associated is almost 50%, and it is basically into when the communication open into the RV outflow tract. This is our list of RSOB. So mainly our data was from non-coronary to right atrium. So it is something different from that, but this is our experience with RSOB. The intervention was first attempted by the Cullen in 1994. Then Dr. Arora published 8 cases in 2004. After that, we have many publications like Dr. Praful, Dr. Jayarangathan from our institutes. So there are many series from Indian and other Asian countries. Coils were used in small communication, but now it is mainly device. Commonest being conducted ATO1. Then vascular plug, AVP2 basically, muscular VSD device in large defects. ASD device being used by some, but it is not, I feel, a very great device because disc is too big. It can encroach on the aortic valve. And the combined procedure, basically coaptation and ASD device closure, has been reported with the RSOB. We would mainly integrate deployment of the device, but a few cases reported of the retrograde also. Complication can happen with any intervention, which can happen here also. We need to be very careful. That's why we need to have our surgical team stand by when we go for that. They should be properly informed about the patients. So you can have failure, you can have device embolization, you can have hemolysis. Hemolysis, one of the patient had renal failure, secondary to hemolysis in our case, arrhythmias and death. So these are the complications known to happen in the percutaneous intervention for structural defects. It can happen with RSOB also. So to conclude, rupture sinus of valsalva is a relatively rare cardiac anomaly. Presentation from asymptomatic to acute heart failure to death, everything is known. Third is the gold standard established treatment for these defects. Percutaneous transcatheter closure have now become equally efficacious with fewer complications, and it is being done now quite frequently. Depends outcome on operator expertise, patient selection, and the selection of hardware. This is crucial for any structural defect closure. RSOB from non-coronary sinus are easier for percutaneous overall because there is no coronary, and you need to have a watch from the coronary artery and impingement of the aortic valve. You can't create close a defect and create aortic infestation or create coronary issues. So you need to be careful when you are closing these defects because it is a very delicate position where we have the defect. Complete closure is mandatory because there is risk of hemolysis, risk of bacterial endocarditis.
So, time is up, probably can smoothly.
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry to be very hard on you, because otherwise discussion part will get delayed. Dr. Praful?
Yeah, thank you, Munesh. Only thing is that I'll request you now, when we are doing the panel discussion, you might want to keep your video off. Your audio gets little interrupted when you do it. Yeah. That's an excellent presentation. We'll have discussion afterwards together. Please hang on there. Yeah. Let us have Dr. Edwin doing the screen sharing and showing his case, please. Then we'll have a discussion on RSOBs.
Oh, yeah, sharing, is it? You're able to see my screen?
Yes, very well. And you're well audible.
Okay, so just quickly go to
all others.
Yeah, Dr. Manish has done a good job of having a complete covering of the how do you indications and how to go with the procedure. So I'll just stick to basically 1 or 2 cases and then we'll discuss after this. So this is a 64-year-old guy who had almost progressive symptoms for almost a year. Only thing, he has multiple comorbidities. He was hepatocellular carcinoma treated, decompensated cirrhosis, uncontrolled hypertension, diabetes, and basically got a cardiology consult. It was being managed in the gastro unit and showed a significant LVBB in ECG. And X-ray you can see is quite cardiomegaly, pleural effusions. Then obviously you can see the echo picture in which the cardiac function is not great. And you have this continuous murmur and this RSO is picked up. So obviously it's not a good candidate for surgical candidate, obviously. We'll come to that in the discussion part. So just go to the angiogram. I find those arising, actually, Manish told it's probably an LAO may be good for those arising on the right torn sinus. But I find that it also, when the course of the windsock also may determine the view probably. Here I probably got a better view with a RAO in which the windsock is entering into the RVOT. So I find those windsocks entering the RVOT is going to be slightly more difficult sometimes, and those going to the RA tend to be more easier. Like the non-coronary to the RA tend to be more easier. So you can see, only thing I want to hear, I want to fix that, to stress the point here that opening is not very big. We measured something 5-6 millimeters only. The windsock measured on 12 millimeters. I always try to slightly oversize the device. But here I thought it was a pretty easy case. And then I thought basically because there is no space to keep and initially you always almost use usually the PDA device, Radio 1. But here I thought there may not be in a space to get the PDA device into the narrow exit point. I thought I will take a vascular plug. And actually that initial attempt by my colleague failed. So I thought it was probably he didn't do it right. So I just took over and then deployed the same 14 mm vascular plug. I initially got a decent position. I think I was done with the procedure. I was happy with the position. Once I released the last release, I thought the last disc will come up and then almost a close, which is seen immediately after the release, after the deployment. And it's a vascular plug, so it doesn't have a fabric inside. So then I was waiting for echo and all. Suddenly the whole device flips into the RV. So then I thought I'm undersized it. Probably I got a usual ADO 1, the PDA device, and I was more careful. Release the RA, the disc in the aorta, pulled it well, and then deployed. And I just pulled it, immediately slipped and distorted and came into the windsock. And then try to reposition, push it back, or partly get it well occluded. Then again, whole thing slipped out. So this was the device size I've used, 18-16 PDA device itself slipped in. So at that point, you can see the last angiogram. Before I play it, you can see a TPI, and the patient deteriorated. He went into a heart block. I don't know why. He already have a pre-existing left bundle branch block. And while I tried to try a retrograde method from each time you have to go and make a AV loop. So I thought I would try to deploy it from the aortic side. Patient deteriorated. I had to ventilate him. He had went into heart block, and then I had to took a TPI and to pace him, and we went ahead with a 20 mm vascular plug from the arterial side. You can see it was quite difficult. I thought to deploy one disc in RVOT and the rest within, but every time it was flipping into the RV completely. Again, pull back. Again, try to put the middle disc in the windsock. Again, I initially don't succeed. But then again, I pulled further back into the aorta because in the reverse way, it is more easier to pull back. Here, it is more difficult because the aortic pressure is pushing it out. But finally, I managed to get a decent position. And then you can see this is a position here. And then I'm checking it. The position looks okay. The distal tip alone is moving in the RVOT. And then I finally release it. And there's a final position in. Patient did well. So this is the only thing I just shown you here because we can deploy it retrograde also. There's a vascular plug is an additional choice which you can use if you have difficulty, or a muscular VSD may be an option in this. And just quickly go to the second case. Actually, this is given to my colleague from outside the state. He was not keen to present it, but I thought I wanted to present some difficulties also. Again, he thought this is a very large windsock and an exit point was small. He tried to use a regular 1210 PDA device. The patient was sick. There was on inotropic support, was on diuretic infusion. He thought again he got a good position here, and then he was doing an angiogram to confirm. And then while waiting for the repeat angiogram, the device was again slipped. So he put in a bigger device. This time he tried a 1614. He said he had put another device again. It was not coming the way he was allowed to. So again, he was trying to manipulate that, still trying to get a good position. And then the whole thing slipped out and the patient deteriorated. I don't know exactly what has gone wrong. There was no significant AR, there was no effusion according to him. So, but then patient arrested and then could not be revived. So I was talking to some other colleagues also that they said they also had some scenarios in which you almost occlude it for some moment and then you suddenly the device slips and suddenly patient deteriorates. You don't know. Basically, the patient to start off with was difficult. So I think just one last case, I'm not going to just quickly go through. It's a big device again, like I told, I put in a 1820 device in this patient. Only thing I want to impress upon here is, I will skip through them. This was the position here. I got a good result here. And then this was a previous position and I pulled and got a good position. But then 6 hours later, I think I had a good job. 6 hours later, suddenly my fellow calls and tells me that the heart pressure is dropping down, he's having hypotension. And I asked him to do an echo. This is echo, a significant ventricular dysfunction. Very bad ventricular dysfunction. This was a large defect. I used an 1820 LifeTech PDA device. So I have to take him back. My adult colleague said that you almost always look at the coronary gain. Even though I was sure, I did a coronary angiogram and then put an IABP, ventilated him, and he recovered after some time. So I think stop here. I think we can have a discussion.
Well, Edwin, great cases that you showed, and she also, Munish was able to take a step-by-step how to do the RSOV. Now, a few points about that I wanted to add after having seen Dr. Munish's case. Now, yes, of course, you can snare it from wherever you think it's comfortable. But RSOV is getting into the RS. I almost always spend a little extra time and somehow invariably you succeed in getting the wire either into the SVC, the crossing wire, the angle termo is what we usually use. You get into the SVC or into the IVC also if you are lucky. But by and large, you almost always do it and you somehow try and avoid getting into the pulmonary artery only because in that hole, the snaring becomes that much more easier. That's one point I wanted to make there. The other thing is that yes, you also, now all your series that I saw, that there was all 16/14 with a maximum use. So having seen that you described your RSOV at the aortic end as being 11 millimeters, reflexively I knew that you must have taken a 16/14 device. So what eventually has happened, though we initially published our series and Jay has also joined, Jay can join in with comments also, we almost always go 4 to 6 millimeters higher at the aortic end wise, So that is why do we want to do that? Because they have flimsy margins throughout. It's a wind sock, that's what it's called. So the stouter aortic rim is what is the stoutest of the lot, right? Meaning the entry. And that's where you want your aortic disc to be parked definitely into the aorta. A little slip down also, you don't want to accept it. So that, and again, when there are multiple outpouchings, just doing it at the exit end, you might get away with it, but these are the ones which Edwin was asking me to show us some complications, Unfortunately, to pull them out is very difficult, so I was not able to show. But yes, if you have gone and accepted at the exit end, then in the evening, you might find somebody calls you up and all, and they're just about to embolize types and have to be sent over to the surgeon. That's when we flouted our own norms. But having said today that there is a LifeTech device available, and that you just have to not restrict to the Amplatzer devices, the St. Jude devices. 16/14 is the maximum that was available. And therefore, 11-12 was a cutoff at the aortic end, 11-12, not to attempt those because they invariably slip down. And that is what it was. Then coming to what Dr. your case, now coming to Edwin's case, it must be a long-standing RSOV.
Exactly.
Okay. There was a nice calcification along the sinus also. Maybe that was one reason why you had some difficulty. Then you were brave to have come retrograde and do it. because till you have released, I am never comfortable doing retrograde closures of any shunts for that matter. Till you are released, you don't know how it's going to be, and it's
to behave.
could embolize potentially. So coming back to your case, one tip that you use, the most difficult ones, Edwin, are the ones which I feel at least are the ones, RVOT ones are the most difficult, because you are from the vein, from the femoral vein, you are never coaxial. And to get a little coaxiality, I deploy the aortic disc, and then actually before coming down, you want to put an extra length of the cable upwards, you know.
Yes, exactly.
You want to literally push a little bit so that you get a more horizontal alignment. That's what I have noticed also when we are doing AP windows. You know, they almost always have to come oblong. The aortic disc has to come oblong, and therefore it will tend to come in there. So still I would have yet gone venous route. I don't think there is a need to go retrograde at all. Having gone retrograde, conceptually it's a great idea. Retrograde, if at all Nagesh has joined us, I do not know whether he's used a double disc Coneti device at all. So there is a sock. You get a good idea. Even the surgeon pulls out the sock from the aortic end. So if you have a double disc device with a good clamshell around it, so whether you can, you go in that retrograde, he came in with the AVP device, it will give you a good, the distal disc deployed retrogradely with an AVP. I haven't ever come across anybody having done it with an AVP, but that's again brave, I would say. You do not have enough length and yet you want to do an AVP. You pull that back and then you sort of be able to do the rest of it.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering whether Nagesh is an expert of doing all retrogrades. Your views on doing retrograde.
No,
One thought was whether you would want to ever advocate doing all this under transthoracic. I am a strong believer of transesophageal. All throughout, you can really monitor what's happening to the AR, as well as with the ones which rupture into the RVOT. You can also look at, obstruction occurring or otherwise to the device. When that we did live, along with Bharat, I did live for the PICS meeting. That patient also developed some RVOTO, even had pre-existing a little bit, which got detected on table and then got a little bit, but thankfully he's not progressed at all. He was like, he's still with about 30 gradients across the RVOT. Yeah, and one final thought about the complication with patient becoming hypotensive. Increasingly large RSOVs, that is virtually become the afterload mismatch, and LV dysfunction is something that never got reported. We only reported those afterload mismatch ARs. But LV dysfunction, even with huge coronary cameral fistula recently, we are putting them all together. But we were blind probably in the past not to have noticed that. But that is virtually the norm, getting an LV dysfunction due to afterload mismatch. Yes, go ahead. Nagesh wanted to say something.
Thank you very much. We had experience of course, we can't compete the experience of RSOV with you and Jay. We have experience of retrograde in 2 cases. It is one of the good procedure, actually. It is not a bad procedure, but the important aspects is we should take a braided sheath in these cases.
Exactly.
So
once again, I just want you to answer the question so that in the same, when you make a discussion, Dr. Justin Paul has asked, when do you choose to close without the AV loop formation? And there was another question from Sanjeev Kateria, want to know what the solution for the sheath kinking. So your answer can modify.
Sheath kinking, potentially it is common with non-braided sheaths, especially Mullen sheath if you use in RSOV. Even in RVOT side also you may get it, even you go from venous side. I prefer braided sheath in case of RSOV. Especially when you are going retrograde, definitely we should use a braided sheath. Always make sure that you keep a wire there to prevent the kinkage of the sheaths. And when you are using retrograde, it may be good idea. Sometimes you can keep the wire also.
Exactly.
So that you can have a control over the device. So 2 cases when we are using a muscular VST device is possible. Maybe small defects, one defect we closed it with the ADO2, but I don't have experience with the Konar MF in case of RSOV at this point of time.
No, but Konar again, because if you have some clamshell mechanism types, ADO2s, if they were available, conceptually something like an ADO2 available in large sizes, then it's very slam dunk. It would be just come from the retrograde, go pull the sock backwards, also all the flimsy material, then deploy it in the aortic side, also the disc. And if they are going to come together, that will be great, I would think,
Praful,
Yes, Jay, you wanted to add retrograde.
a couple of questions. I think a good discussion.
Yeah.
There are a couple of indications I feel for a retrograde approach. There are a couple of indications. One indication what Edwin showed, like it's a great advantage only in the RSOVs where you open into the RVOT. Otherwise, if it is opening to the RA or RV body, it is very simple RSOV. It's nothing to discuss about that. We need to do always antegrade only. Retrograde, I think when the sac is very, very long, serpentinous one, very long one, where you expect some kind of a problem because of aligning the sheath, aligning the device, what we saw in Edwin's case. Sometimes I have done only one I had difficulty in putting the device from the antegrade end. So I think I switched back. I knew that we can go back to the retrograde and do that. And I have used only a muscular VSD as you are propagating that. I completely agree with you. I think we should use a double disc device. Here, Edwin got away with that because it's not as stable device or a sturdy device like a muscular VSD. So that is, I think muscular VSD, though it is expensive, I know that. Maybe I think it's not much expensive nowadays.
Yeah.
I think that's the best device. You can finish the case very quickly. And another indication I feel, if you are not well versed with any kind of RSOV doing by own yourself, an inexperienced operator, the patient is very sick, you don't have much experience, especially the RVOT I'm talking about. RVOT or RV, you have to save the patient. I think this is the best method because you just enter with the aorta, adult patients, you can put a 8F sheath or 9F sheath, enter the RV or P, and easily it can be done. Of course, if you have a TE, nothing like that. I always also
have never experienced difficulty in not being able to do the antegrade route.
No, only once I have.
I used to do a retrograde in an interesting, from the left sinus. It was actually an acquired RSOV in the sense the aorta arthritis patient, which had burrowed into the interatrial septum and then into the LA. So that's when I had used the retrograde method because he didn't want to do a transeptal and go about it.
Yeah.
That's when I had used actually an ADO one, in the usual ADO, the reverse disc in the LA side, and then pulled it and done it.
Very quick comment, Edwin, pertaining to your case. Sure. I don't prefer tri-lobe device like a AVP2. It has got 3 lobes. Exactly. Unless you have a long parking zone, it is not going to stand there because it will be pushed either into RV or into aorta.
Agreed, definitely.
So that's why I found it's a very difficult in these case scenarios. Unless you have a vessel like a coronary fistula, maybe muscular device alone may be sufficient.
Yeah, muscular. I didn't have a muscular device in my store in the shelf. Okay. That is why I was not used.
Okay.
And before
because
that,
the mechanism is the stenting and capturing the windsock.
Yeah,
exactly. That will help.
Yeah, our Dr. Shivakumar and Dr. Krishna is in line.
KK, why don't you come in also when he has chat?
I just want a question here from the audience. There are many questions on. I want Krishna to just answer them. Do we have used CT imaging pre-procedure to decide the size of the device? And one more question is that how do you exactly size it? I mean, how you go about whether by the echo size or the angiogram? I would just want inputs from Dr. Krishna.
So for CT, I think it's a bit of an overkill. If you want to size it, I think the combination of a good echo, including TE, and angiography should be more or less enough in sizing the device. Yes, CT would enable some level of precision, but you have to understand the CT may not capture the largest size because CT freezes a frame in systole or diastole. You're not very sure when. And this is a dynamic structure. I think echo would offer a greater, and angiogram will offer a greater potential of being very precise about the largest size because there's a lot of dynamicity here. There's a lot of change in systole versus diastole. So you must get the largest size. And that's important. And I think the reason why both Dr. Kerkar and Jayaranganath are recommending 4+ is because they just want to make sure they take care of that variability in that whole system where you're not very sure. And you can experience a device you think is precise will just slip through. So it's all. I think the best thing is to look at TE. In my opinion, it gives you a very good idea. Look at it in multiple dimensions, and I tend to depend a lot on that. On angiogram, sometimes overlapping structures precisely catch the origin in the aortic end may not be as good. The high frame rates of echo enable you to get very precise. So I think you don't decide on your size when you're doing it in the echo room, transthoracic, for sure. You make the final judgment when you do the TE. And I agree with both Jay and Praful that we have to have TE in these situations because you need a lot of precision.
Actually, my fellow was also here. We don't have to show that case now that there is hardly any time. But we've done not one, but 3 cases with bad shock state patients and all, where we have not used a drop of contrast. And one such case was now during the pandemic, when he got treated as COVID everywhere, including a CT. The only time CT that has been done in my patient is when the CT was done out of COVID business. And obviously RSOV was missed. They just looked at the lung fields and then they came out of it. And then when Imran, who is logged in also, here with his PPE on and all, he went to the COVID side and he auscultated the patient and heard that harsh continuous murmur, did a bedside echo and diagnosed an RSOV. By the time he came to us 2-3 weeks later altogether, in all this business of a COVID pandemonium, as we call it, rather than the pandemic in this case. And then we could do it without a drop of contrast. And again, the life take was a bailout there. We used a 22 by 20. It was too large. Otherwise, we would have normally sent it over to the surgeon. And a 22 by 20 device was put, and this guy walked home. He was in metabolic encephalopathy, INR was some 4 or so, hepatic dysfunction, creatinine 3 point something, barely getting out urine types of a guy. And he walked home, thankfully. The COVID miss, and that happened except totally TE guided. Absolutely nothing of a contrast done. So CT again, all these guys are in right heart failure. And where is the question of CT in such patients? I don't think we need CTs for RSOV. Whereas we want to the next step. But that's where CT is all important, is coronary cameral fistula. So is there any more questions?
One question, Dr. M.N. Krishnan was asking that, do you have any specific angiographic criteria for selection of the device in RSOV? Are you going to take it?
Angiographic criteria? No, I almost always rely totally on transesophageal echo for device sizing.
Yeah, fine.
Always do it. But accidentally, sometimes you see an extra outpouching somewhere, or you may even have missed a second rupture site also sometimes, and which angiographically you might see sometimes. Okay. But always, there is a case report of 2 rupture sites, good old days, Ziad Hijazi publishing at 2 rupture sites, 2 devices put. Again, exit point to close RSOV is a big folly. You convert a ruptured aneurysm into an unruptured aneurysm of sinus of Valsalva, and with a potential to rupture elsewhere some point in time. So it is always to be closed like the surgeon does at the aortic end, is what I strongly believe.
There's another question there is Dr. Sainil Abdul, as if there's a moderate AR after pre-release, what do you want to do? I don't think there is no doubt that he has any.
So therefore, this AR, again, it's only the transesophageal echo online where you see the pre-ARs also, which might have been missed or otherwise. Now, how much to take it, you can never, a moderate AR, which was not there before, and suddenly moderate. A mild AR going up by 1 grade is a different matter. But otherwise, we've come out also where, and you can never predict in whom you are going to cause that AR. Okay. But on the TE, if you are sure you are definitely not encroaching on the leaflet, then also if you release, it's still a different matter. But moderate AR is something that I don't accept. And whatever be the mechanism of it. Having said that, we've described a moderate AR following an AP window closure in a kid. Absolutely remote from the aortic valve totally, just afterload mismatch, which on a follow-up, that's a case report from us, which on a follow-up abated, which was hardly any trivial level at 6 months follow-up. Okay. So, but during closure, if you have developed moderate AR, then I will not accept that. I won't release that device. I'll come out and send him over to the surgeon.
Okay. Any other comments? Dr. Shiva?
Just one point to add, Edwin, the patient who suddenly had a death following the device pulling through, you can easily create a 10 millimeter orifice into an 18 millimeter orifice by pulling through a large device. And the patient can have what was originally a compensated shunt to become a completely uncompensated shunt. So it is actually the moment you are entering into the scene, you are committed. And that is one of the reasons why you can obviously think about oversizing the device, but never keep on like pulling back devices and making the hole larger and larger. And at one particular point of time, the aortic diastolic will go so low that coronary perfusion will become zero. Then you will not have the patient coming out of the situation.
Yeah, the other thing is about complete heart block development. Also, we've had a delayed complete heart block, meaning third day or so. When he was discharged and came back with a syncope and we had a complete heart block, that was an oversized device. Actually, that was done during a live transmission and everybody clapped about the closure at that time, but subsequently came. Thankfully, he responded to steroids and we've had a good follow-up on him and he's been doing fine. So oversizing has to be taken with a little bit of a...
In my case, it recovered the night, around 3-4 hours later, the night I came back to see the patient, they had recovered back to sinus fluid. Probably had multiple comorbidities, so we had mentioned to them about that. Is that fine? Any further questions? What is the degree of RVOT obstruction after RSOV closure you're going to accept after those closure to the RCC to the RVOT? Is it?
I have had only one.
Generally, it is a mild turbulence. You will see. You don't see obstruction unless there is a pre-existing VST with RVOT or other things. But I have not seen any case of RVOT obstruction.
Dr. Ramdev
We had one where there was a tiny VSD which we did as a live case that I was trying to tell you. That patient did develop a higher gradient than it was on table. There was no gradient. And then that patient did develop a gradient. He still has a 30 millimeter gradient that's going on. It's possible we had missed it. And there was an associated VSD which we had decided to leave it. It was an adult patient, okay? Adult 30 something.
Doctor asked the same question, like that same difficulty I had. How do you align the device in that RCFC rupture to RVOT? Like the same trouble I had, I don't know.
The alignment, I always believe in giving a little extra cable so as to make the device, instead of being like that, make it this way and then hang on. Again, I heard Munish say that the tug, they just slip through. In fact, here, this is one device where, like an ASD closure, you don't even want the tug. You just want to be free there, echo-guided. You are not absolutely at the flush on the aortic side. Echo-guided, disc is open. Then gently open the other one and let it ride. And quickly, when you open the other one, push the cable a little up so that it aligns well. And hang on there for a while. And that works.
Yeah, don't
for RVOT
get all significantly enough to prevent it to slip out.
Yeah.
I think our time is probably nearly 40 minutes of our first session. I think probably move on to the next speaker. Dr. Praful, you can invite.
Oh, yes. Okay, let's now, having done this exotic RSOV stuff, now let's move on to coronary cameral fistulas. Now, like in the adult side, we have, since there are a lot of adults who are viewers out here, we have the so-called oculostenotic reflex. Here is a defect, so to say, meaning congenital heart disease, coronary cameral fistula, wherein the holistic approach may not always work. With that caveat, let's call in Nageshwar Rao, especially which kind of fistula. There might be a lot of discussion which ones you should really leave alone, which ones you might want to close. So for that, we have the great Nageshwar Rao, we just discussed also that he's patented a device on his own name, that is a double disc ADO kind of a device. He will tell us he's going to show some exotic coronary cameral fistula closures. Go ahead, Nagesh. You're not audible. Please unmute yourself.
Jai Ranganath is going to do the presentation in the beginning, but however, can you see?
I'm sorry, I was told Jai Ranganathan is the last.
No.
Okay.
We should hear from the master first.
Can you share your screen?
Yeah, I am trying to share that. Can you see my slides?
Yes, very well. Good to start.
Thank you very much, Edwin and Professor Perkar and other senior colleagues, friends. I thank my colleagues. This is the 24 weeks of gestation fetus. Second gravida mother came from for routine fetal scan in view of social reasons. There was no history of gestational diabetes, hypertension, thyroid abnormalities. There was no definitive indication for fetal echo. So this is the 4-chamber view. You can see that there is a lot of color turbulence is in the right atrium. We don't know where it is coming from. So when we carefully interrogate, this is the ascending aorta here, left ventricular outflow tract. This is where the right coronary artery. This is where the left coronary artery. So there is a flow arising, color flow arising. You can clearly see here. Upon interrogation of that, now you can see some track, bizarre track is going and then emptying into the right atrium. So we can see that this is the aorta. If you label that, there is a tortuous circuit and then going into the right atrium. So to show that more better way, so you have a fistula which is going like this and then to right atrium, and we can see that there is a continuous flow here. So this gives a schematic representation of a fistula which is coming from the right atrium to right coronary artery to the mid right atrium. So we diagnosed that postnatal course, normal delivery, asymptomatic, no history of lower respiratory infection, normal growth and development, heart sounds were normal, pulse was normal. There was a continuous murmur on the parasternal area. So we followed very closely for 15 months. We thought after 10 kilogram, we should do the procedure. So this is the EKG, which is showing not much of volume overload, a normal, other than Q waves which are present dominantly in V5, V6, CTR of around 55%, right atrium is enlarged. So this is the echocardiogram here. Now you can see that the right coronary artery fistula, which is coming here and going and then opening in the right atrium through intraatrial septum. So we can see very clearly here. The narrowest measurement is at the orifice is 2.9 millimeter, whereas this is the a zone which is uniformly dilated and then sags before it opens. So now plan of management, when you are comfortable with the fistula closure, unless there is a symptom or symptomatic state, large heart or heart failure, otherwise we can electively do the procedure. A CT angiogram and transcatheter closure is mandatory. We actually ask for CT angiogram, but in view of a pandemic, a lot of COVID patients were going for the CT scan. We thought we electively avoid that and then directly do the angiogram. So we took the child for the transcatheter closure under general anesthesia, femoral vein and femoral artery taken, heparin 100 units per kilogram, keeping ACT more than 200, and prophylactic antibiotics given. This is the AP view fistula, because the right coronary artery to RA, it's better profiled in AP, RAO and lateral views. So here AP view, you can see the fistula which is coming from right coronary, and then the circulations are there. So this is RAO view, which you can't see because entire contrast is going, and also this is a pigtail catheter which has got a side holes a bit higher side. Nowadays we are not getting a pediatric pigtail catheter where side holes are very close to the end hole so that you can give angiogram. Unfortunate thing because of so many reasons. So you can see in lateral view, this is the communication. However, angiograph pictures are not very impressive. We thought we'll balloon occlude or put a catheter and then do the angiogram. So this is what the diagram which initially. So what is the approach? Transvenous approach, AV loop, transarterial retrograde, transjugular approach. What is the approach which we are thinking? Would you like to have questions here, or shall I go proceed? Complete case.
You can continue now. We'll
Okay.
have the discussions after.
So we have various devices: ADO1, 2, AVP2, Serap plug, muscular device, and coils. So these are all various essential things which we have. We can use it. So we thought we'll use ADO1. Our initial plan is crossing from aorta, snaring the wire, formation of AV loop, either 6 French Mullens or 6 French ANL. Then sheath angiogram, put a ADO1 or AVP2 was the one of the plan. However, we found that the fistula tract you can see in AP view with a O14 run through wire, which was causing a very significant tortuosity. We could not actually snare and make it hemodynamically stable in this patient. We attempted even in the from the pulmonary artery as well. Whenever we tried to snare that, then it is causing some hemodynamic and it's a very difficult to snare. So we decided our plan B. So we thought we'll first do with the balloon occlusion angio. This is the 5 millimeter renal balloon. We did not actually put into the fistula tract. We put outside the fistula tract and we pulled to snug the exit point, which appeared very narrow, and then done the angiogram. You can see the right coronary artery filling entirely. A selective left angiogram done, and which is a normal. So you have a fistula here, 2 multiple snags, and a tunnel-like structure here, and a small circulation, and then you have a right coronary artery coming. So these are the measurements. This is 3.8 millimeter. This is 10.8 millimeter. So we changed our plan going retrogradely. What Dr. Praful Kerkar is telling, that a fan of retrograde, I do agree that we thought we rapidly changed our decision to retrograde, used a 6 French guide catheter, and we thought we'll do 8-6 Konar MFO. So this is the Konar MFO device. As you know that there's a conical structure here, and you can deploy from the high pressure disc or low pressure disc. You can load the device in either direction. So this is going through 6 French guide catheter, a 8-6 Konar MFO device, easily, smoothly. There is no problem there. You can see that this is the dilated segment. We put the guide catheter in the dilated segment, and then we thought we'll park the disc there. You can see the disc is being parked very nicely, and it formed. Now you can see that, sorry for that. So now you can see that the disc is formed very nicely at the end. So we are happy with that. Then we thought we'll deploy the rest of the structure. So rest of the structure is parked, but you should remember this is a low profile device, medium profile device. The device will never form like muscular VST or ADO1, where it has got high profile. It will actually make the vascular structure under stress, whereas this device is a medium profile device. It configured and confined to the vascular structure here, and you can see that the fistula is completely occluded with this device. So this is the final position. You took the shape of the fistula. A high pressure disc is being completely distorted, and here low pressure disc is in the whereas the saccular aneurysmal sac. This is the post-procedure echocardiogram. So post-procedure, we gave heparin because it's a single procedure. We did not do diagnostic study and intervention separately. Aspirin 3 milligram per kg. We checked TROP-T and CK-MB with our previous experience. ECG, everything was normal. This is the literature on the prenatal diagnosis by Garlin. And thank you very much for the your patient listening. I welcome the questions.
Yeah, in the interest of time, let us have the second presentation and then come back for discussion for coronary fistula. Yeah. So Jake, can you come up?
Yeah.
Close your cases.
Can see that now?
Yes, very well. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Edwin, Dr. Praful, and the organizing committee. So we'll quickly go through the 2-3 cases here. Dr. Nageshwara has nicely presented this case. 3 different clinical situations here. I'll just run through that. 7-year-old male presented with complaints of palpitations and fatigue for last 6 months. The clinical examination, high volume pulse, all peripheral pulses felt,
May I
and
interrupt?
there is a to and fro murmur all over the pericardium.
Jay, can you put off your video, please? Because your audio is getting very shaky. So you put off your video and go ahead and present.
Yeah. 1 minute. I'm just going.
No, Jay, you can go with your presentation, put off your video.
No, I'm doing that. Just a minute. Sorry. Is it okay now?
Yeah.
Better?
Yeah, very good.
Okay.
Voice is good.
Sorry for that. Yeah, there's a to and fro murmur over the pericardium. This is the brief echocardiogram. It shows a fistulous tract from the aorta. We had some difficulty in finding out what exactly it is. It's a fistula, or it's a tunnel, or some kind of aneurysm from the aortic area. So we did a CT. Finally, it turned out to be some kind of an aortic thing opening into the LV. It's a tunnel, AV, left ventricular tunnel. It is showing a lot of moderate plus AR. So this is the measurement of the tract. You could see there. So this is a CT. You see the grossly dilated aorta. This is the LV, and you can see from the aortic area above the left coronary area is supplying a huge aneurysm kind of a thing opening into the LV. So this is the femoral artery approach. Aortogram in the Aravo view, you could see that the whole fistulous tract opening into the LV. And we did the coronary separately. It is away from the coronary, left main coronary artery. So we labeled it as a aortic to the LV tunnel. So it had, echocardiogram also, it had a severe moderate plus AR. So there's a lot of discussion going on what to do exactly, whether we'll try attempting the device closure. Many times it was distorting the aortic root, causing a AR. That was one of the things we thought. We thought we'll close with the device. So we had bilateral approach initially because we wanted to have a very clear this thing post procedure. With the older boy, so we had bilateral access with the femoral artery. Trying to close from the femoral approach. So every time when we were trying to do that, because it was taking multiple curve, it used to back out, and we were not able to position that in exactly the area where we wanted to put that device. We wanted to use a muscular VSD device in the narrowest part so that through both the discs will align, will take shape and close that, like what we close a muscular VSD. But it did not happen. Some attempts, this of course, KK happened to be in Bangalore. I had called him up at that time. KK really helped us. When we were doing that, he just walked into the cath lab that time. The issues what we were is that you can see that how the outpoaching was there. Sorry. Okay. So we switched over to the axillary approach. We punctured the right axilla. Usually the axillary artery is much bigger than the femoral arteries. It's not very difficult to get the axillary arteries, especially late, we have been doing most of the stenting of the PDS through the axillary approach, even in neonates. So it was not very difficult. The issues were from the femoral approach, a lot of curves. So that was not allowing us to deploy the device. So you see the straight course here from the axilla. So this is aligning nicely. We did not have any difficulty here. We made sure that the coronaries are okay. It was not anywhere near the coronaries. Echocardiogram at that time, we showed no AR, very minimal AR. We were confident enough to release the device. You could see the absolutely very trivial AR, and the fistula or the tunnel is closed comfortably. This is the post-device echo. This is many types are there. I don't want to go into the detail. We go back quickly to the second case. This is a 54-year-old female with dyspnea and exertion for last 1 to 2 years. This is the femoral approach. This is the fistula, which looks like this is from the left main coronary artery, having multiple circulations and undulations and curves opening into the RA. My colleagues were doing that. They seek my help. Initially, they were not able to snare because it's multiple circulations. It's not very easy to snare. In fact, it is not very easy to enter the termo wires, whatever the 3.2 or 3.5. Extremely difficult. Better to use the atrophilic wires. But even if the atrophilic wires, they were not able to get into that and snare it. So it switched to the jugular approach, and it is very easy to use the atrophilic, enter the fistula into the RA and getting into the SVC area, but that was not enough. So we used the microcatheter to give the support to the whisper wire, and we snared along with the microcatheter. Once that is done, the diagnostic catheter which was there, which was used to enter the fistula, was also snared out, and from then onwards, using a braided sheath, it was very easy from the jugular approach. So these are all some of the rare cases where we need to probably switch over to some other axis, either the venous axis, femoral to jugular, from the femoral arterial to the axillary approach. This is another 18-month-old child. Lot of difficulty in getting into the LMCA into the RA once again. Doesn't look very difficult initially. That, as Nageshwar Rao was telling, that whatever the wire we use and a lot of issues in snaring it out. So even from the retrograde approach, coming from the femoral, it was very difficult. So we switched to the axillary approach. I think it's pretty easy to use because it avoids a lot of curves. It becomes easy. And in the axilla, when you're putting a slightly bigger device, you can use a larger sheet. If you are planning to use a 5F sheet from the femur, you can easily use the 6F from the axilla. Once that is done, it is got over. So take-home points, the multimodality imaging is absolutely necessary. Unlike the RSOV here, we need the imaging with the help of the CT. We need to change the approach as it is needed many times. Axillary approach off late, at least to me, my experience, it has given me a very quick procedural time, and I could be able to finish the procedure quickly. Thank you.
Great.
Well, thank you. So the session is open for discussion now. There are a lot of questions in the chat box. As also, I might like to announce to everybody that there are about 370 odd delegates who have logged in, and I'm told there are predominantly adult cardiologists. Only the coronary cameral bit, there are a lot of pediatric involvement here. And then we have also our co-panelists here. There's an international guest, Dr. Taufik from Bangladesh, who's also a part of it, and I would invite him to join as well. And Dr. Parag also has questions which you can directly ask out of the people who have presented. And very interesting part is that there are 50 odd delegates from all over the world, actually right from Brazil to Mali to Caracas. I didn't know about this country, to tell you very frankly. So then there are people from Bangladesh and elsewhere also who have logged on over here. So coming to Dr. Nageshwar Rao's case, there was a question to you as to how, this is general to coronary cameral fistulas as such, as to how comfortable are you, what is your meaning for coronary cameral ones we are talking about, not necessarily the aorto LV tunnel. How comfortable, what kind of antiplatelet stroke anticoagulant strategy do you follow? Is there anything that is like uniformly that everybody can do it, or there is no, what do you call, is there any consensus on the
I think
issue?
it is mandatory to give lifelong antiplatelet medication, especially we give aspirin. We don't give dual antiplatelets in children unless the fistula sac is unreasonably dilated with multiple sacs and you deployed very distally and proximal no flow, slow flow, if it is present, then you have to give oral anticoagulants. Otherwise, if you are closing very proximally, earlier distally, very proximally, there is no unreasonable sac which is left, and coronaries are very clear. Antiplatelets alone is sufficient. Otherwise, by and large, you have to give oral anticoagulants if the proximal segment is left with unreasonable. But they need lifelong oral antiplatelet medications. I had a patient with inferior wall MI 3 years after coronary AV fistula closure, presented with inferior MI after stopping aspirin. So again, we gave urokinase and we treated that child.
How much away was your closure in that case? Like, was close to the coronary origin, or it was?
No,
like...
in that case, there was a slow flow and there was the right coronary artery is dilated.
So our aim is to should be to close the fistula as close to the coronary origin. So just beyond that.
Yes.
Not to have
Nowadays, people are using two devices, one at the entry, one at the exit. But I don't believe in closing the exit point. Anyway, you open to the venous system.
Yeah.
So, but mandatory that you close as early, as close as possible, and make sure that a good flow to the coronary artery circulation.
No. Before that, we should make sure that there are no branches are coming.
Now you can show yourself, Jay. Now you can.
Yeah, correct. We have to,
now, when you're not sharing, we like to see you. Okay.
We have to make sure that there are no branches are coming from that fistula tract. This is the fundamental rule.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So the distal fistulas, especially, we always, like for instance, we land up doing a lot of big kids as well as adults also. When there is a distal fistula, like we've had 2 LAD fistulae, okay, meaning distal LAD fistulas into the right ventricle, both of them were that way. And when you go and close it right at the distal, the conduit itself, the entire LAD becomes a conduit. And that's when you want balloon occlusion angiography for sure to look at the distal most important diagonal or septal, whatever is coming from the LAD. The branches of the LAD could be seen. I have some good shots of those also actually. And then you close. But these distal fistula necessarily will require anticoagulation also, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely, isn't it? And then at least for a year of anticoagulation, and then you want to get onto antiplatelets. And if
So
it's an adult, we are comfortable keeping them forever on dual antiplatelet, because we've had both these patients. There were 2 such patients, one elderly, one kid, adolescent, about 14, 16-year-old, whom we closed the distal fistula with an AVP2. It was slow flow immediately that occurred. Thankfully, it was not manifesting with any kind of ECG changes. And he did well. And on a follow-up, actually 3 months later, we angioed him also. We kept him on anticoagulation as well as this thing, a kid actually, means about 14-year-old kid. And then that had recanalized. Some of the AVP2 disc had readjusted and there was some residual that started and there was a nice flow going through. That we escaped. The other kid silently developed some T-wave inversions. Again, he did not present with any MI as such. T-wave inversions, we went to V4 on a follow-up. No regional wall motion abnormality. But we saw on a follow-up angiogram, the LAD is cut off, meaning there are some branches there. And at the site where we have occluded, it has gone ahead and gone retrograde backwards and thrombosed off the distal part. That is how it was. So Larry Latson has written a very great paper on this, meaning Larry Latson group coming together, and distal fistulae, therefore, in adults, especially if they are asymptomatic, accidentally detected for chest pain here and there, whether you should close them at all, firstly. You may not want to close them because whoever have undergone closure, there's a big series that they have brought out, and extremely high incidence of late infarctions and deaths also. That kind of a
I may not agree with your total statement. Reason for that, we have an adult with a distal fistula. It is coming from the conal branch. There was a coronary fistula. Patient actually presented with MI. Patient actually presented with myocardial infarction. I feel that coronary fistula should be closed, but we should give oral anticoagulants,
antiplatelets. Forgetting what I'm trying. You're not understanding what I'm trying to tell you. Conal branch, which means it's a proximal fistula.
Okay. What
I'm meaning is distal, so that the parent coronary artery, if that is a conduit for the fistula, then you ought not to, you may think twice before closing, and if you have closed it, necessarily anticoagulate, as well as if you can tolerate antiplatelet and anticoagulation combination for a first year at least, and definitely dual antiplatelet going on subsequently.
Fine.
Having said that, in adult cardiology, we see a lot of LAD to pulmonary artery fistulae being accidentally detected. So the concept was good old days. We've used, along with our neuroradiologists, they come with the glue, onyx glue and all. So there is like multiple fistulae coming into it and going into pulmonary artery, and some vague chest pain is there. Therefore, he's under the coronary, and then we landed up closing these. But these need not be closed at all unless there is added atherosclerotic coronary artery disease in the distal part.
Question to Nagesh Rao by Dr.
Accidentally detected fistulae need not be closed in adults, especially if they're causing small shunts. That's what is the message about anticoagulation. Now, talking about your device there, you used the Konar device there, and we saw that
there is a question here.
This also became like a bulb, right?
So
what about an AVP2 there?
Yeah, there's a question on the same thing. Dr. Srinivas from Bombay is asking whether AVP2 would have been a better choice.
Exactly. I was asking.
I would not contradict. He wanted to use his device, but then there was a question whether it would have been a better profile in that specific scenario. Like
I have used AVP2 extensively in all structures. It is basically 3 lobes are there.
Absolutely.
The first lobe, you can position it very, very nicely. Second lobe elongates. Third lobe, you will not have control to form that. So after realizing all these things, I used AVP2 earlier also. The formation of the distal, wherever we are holding that disc, is very difficult. You have to either push it or pull it, you have to adjust it. So that's why I am comfortable with the Konar MF device in this particular situation. I closed it. I had a backup plan of AVP2 actually.
The AVP2 we use very often because they're nice long tracts also. Like where you have an aneurysm like thing like what you had, where you push the aortic disc there. We would have put the first disc of the disc there, and the rest of it we would have put it in the tract.
If it is aorta pulmonary collateral, I won't mind putting AVP2. We will have a long zone and no coronary structures.
Okay.
Here issue is we have to deal with the coronary as well.
There's a question from Dr. Subhash about the use of coils actually. On that, I think we had a similar case like when I was doing an echo, like long back fetal echo, Dr. KK diagnosed like this, almost we call it aorta or a tunnel. In that case, we ended up using, that was in 2007, I think. So probably we ended up using coils because we have no options at that point of time. There was a newborn, patient deteriorated. So coils are used, I think, from the panelist. And another question is from the Dr. Subhash.
About coils, I may add here. Whenever you're using coils or in coronary cameral fistula, precision placement is extremely important, especially if you have important branches coming up. I'm not where in a kid where patient has come with heart failure, you just do the exit also is fine to tide over the heart failure. That's a typical left to right shunt type of thing. I'm talking about bigger kids, or I'm talking about adults where precision placement is required. You want something with a retrievability about it. So in that context, there are good papers even in kid population for NIT occlude because there is a detachable mechanism there. So just to do free coils versus to do something with a retrievable part about it. Or bioptome aided, I don't know, KK might add if KK is still around. Bioptome aided with a 3 French bioptome or something like that. If you're able to do coils, then I will take it. But otherwise, just to put in coils, you might want to, after you have used some big device first. And then you might want to use a coil
When
proximal.
I read the case report, what you published that pertaining to the coils, we use a distal fistula closure using the coil. One patient developed on-table myocardial infarction. We had to give intracoronary urokinase that patient and improved. Now coils, I use it.
Yeah.
Once you put the device, if there is a residual leak, I
You
still
use
put
the
a coil proximal to that so that the residual shunt will be closed.
We've done that too.
So we do that as a hybrid method. A device.
Coils I have a role. Coils also have a role according to me in a small child, 3 kg, 4 kg child. You have some difficulty in passing the delivery, either the guiding catheter or a delivery sheath. You can only use the 4F diagnostic catheter. You can use the 018 coils using a micro catheter. That has got a value sometimes. But by and large, I think the devices are pretty safe and not expensive nowadays.
And
But
by
still-
and large, retrievable coils and not necessarily free coils.
Yeah, either way. I mean, if you have a micro catheter, and you
Nitocclude
can
is a
use-
great one there. There is
Yeah.
a good publication on Nitocclude about it, about eight patients or so. Shiva has done a lot of exotic ones. Shiva, why don't you add something to what?
No, Praful, I was enjoying Nageshwar's and Jairanganath's. Just I wanted to add one point. In this, we were talking about this distal fistula, a long-term need for anticoagulation. We had an interesting distal fistula that we closed when the child was around 3 years, and now at 12 years, when there was a vague chest pains, the routine coronary angiogram did not show any significant abnormality except that the feeding vessels were still moderately dilated. But when we advanced an IVUS catheter all throughout, the IVUS was showing marked intimal thickening, and there was changes which the adult coronary guys felt were too pro-atheromatous, meaning there is a lot of fibrosis, high levels of echogenicity. The lumen was, of course, very large. So I agree with Nageshwar and all the other seniors' point that lifelong antiplatelets is possibly justified in every distal fistula. But it's an interesting thing. OCT and IVUS, if we use, probably we will pick up a lot of luminal irregularity in these patients. Distal fistula. Not talking about
Question to
proximal.
you, Shiva, question.
Yeah.
This IVUS is used in coronary arteries where the caliber is 3.5 to 4 millimeter. Whereas the dilated coronary fistula has got a big. Do you get the same picture like what we see in adult?
Yeah, it was not so massively dilated. The vessel was measuring somewhere around 3.5 to 4 millimeter only.
Okay.
3.5 for a 12-year-old boy is something very big, actually. It looks very big. But it was not like the aneurysmals, the giant snake type of coronary fistula.
Okay.
So we were able to get a lot of intimal white scarring on the.
Very interesting. Very
We've had some angiographic follow-ups. They do remodel, the entire dilated main coronary artery. For instance, I remember one right coronary artery also. The whole dilated structure remodels. It also gets some intermittent stenosis-like things also, Not severe stenosis, but little stenosis. We haven't had the opportunity to image them. But we've had that the remodeling occurs. They're no longer as dilated as they were before. But there is stenosis also that we have seen, new stenosis which was not there before in that remodeling process. So it would be interesting now that
there is a paper that is coming up in Circulation Intervention of a group of neonates and young infants who had large coronary artery fistulas with hemodynamic compromise who needed a closure, an angiographic follow-up at 1 to 3 years of age, wherein a large proportion of these infantile and neonatal and infantile coronary fistulas have favorable remodeling. Unfavorable remodeling is more often seen in grown-up patients.
Exactly. So therefore, the concept about adults who have a distal fistula, not to touch them. Add to that, adults have risk factors. They are smokers or hypertensives, diabetics. Then you may not want to close them accidentally detected. That is the point.
Based on this, I would like to raise a question if admin permits.
Yeah, sure.
So, Shiva, your concept of that remodeling and all looks very impressive. Now, what do you feel? How safe is the fistula to be closed during early life? Because by and large, people say that asymptomatic cases, you close it between 2 to 5 years of age. Yeah. That's beyond infancy.
Yeah, actually, your point is correct. What I am talking is infantile and neonatal fistulas which present with gross heart failure, or number 2 indication is a rapid rise in the progression. You are tracking that fetus to neonatal period and then up to 10.5 kilogram when you are intervening. We actually, this is now in the process of final approval in the circulation intervention. It's a multi-institutional study involving a lot of American centers and various other places. We are talking about babies who are less than 6 months of age who present with gross uncontrolled heart failure or very rapid progression of the aneurysm. So you have a newborn who is born with 4 millimeter, and at 3 months it is 8 millimeter, and at 4 months it's like 10 millimeter, rapid rise. So then you close. So there were some well-laid indications for closing those in early neonatal and infantile period fistulas, and there is a substantial remodeling, favorable remodeling in the smaller babies. The primary author is Srinath Gowda from Texas Children, and it involves multiple centers like a lot of the south east countries, India, and so we had collected a meticulous angiographic follow-up on these infantile coronary fistulas.
So
Thank
the
you.
message is that watchful waiting. If you are by imaging, if you think that it is growing, then you might want to intervene early. Otherwise, to intervene waiting till they are a good 10 kgs or something like that, right?
Question from the audience, like basically from adult guys, like Dr. Subhash from Delhi asked, like, what is a way of like tackling when the guide length may not be good enough to reach the distal part of the fistula? Like, so, especially when you have a long fistula, you have to go beyond what are the solutions for from the panelist or somebody, Dr. Parag can chip in, like, how can you tackle that if you are going retrograde, not making AV loop? So the length will be only 100 centimeters, if I am right, about a 120, or what's the guiding catheter length? So adult guys maybe
Use the auxiliary approach
yeah, if that would be the one approach, like
or brachial approach.
yeah, there is that guide extension catheters whether be useful or not.
Yeah.
That's another
Yeah.
option, like putting a guideliners along with it, but then you can put only coils probably by putting through a guideliners and all, I think.
You can go through the upper
No,
limb
if you
approach.
are using
Surprised, there will not be a tall man whose coronary fistula's exit point will be more than 100 centimeters. You'll be able to
We
get
never had in adult, we never had an issue about length of the catheter.
Yeah, 100 centimeter is too long. But we can talk about it for a shuttle sheet of 90 centimeter, but 100 is really long. It will go into
Shiva,
any.
Shiva, I don't know. In iFish, we had a problem. One fistula, I don't know whether you remember, Dr. Subhash was doing that case, RCA to the LV tunnel of the fistula. The length was a problem at that time. Length was definitely a problem. So there are some odd cases.
Sheets will be a problem, Jai, but guiding catheter will not be a problem.
No, guiding, we had to put a longer, bigger device. No, like we had to put an 18 millimeter device.
I'm just telling one clue for this. Whenever you are using you are forced to use a very large device. For example, an 18 millimeter muscular VSD device or a 16 millimeter muscular VSD device, it goes through 8 French guide catheter. So you can put in 8 or 9 French guide catheter and deep throat it, and then you'll be able to get a muscular. Amplatzer muscular VSD device is fortunately one of the lowest profile devices. We have had this situation wherein exactly like what Jay was mentioning, an RCA fistula that was taking hundreds of turns and finally entering like it was almost a 15 centimeter turn within the heart itself. But a guide catheter was you use the muscular VSD device with guide catheter combination, then
Today in adult labs, I don't know how it is down south. In adult labs, 8 French guide catheter availability is also a problem.
No, yeah, I think it's.
So 8 French will take how much big device? Like it will take a.
I used it was a smaller child. We published it in cardiology in the end. 8 French guide was taking a 16 millimeter muscular VSD device.
I doubt, Shiva.
Yeah.
I doubt.
Yeah, because difficult to push in an ADO1.
Use a shuttle sheath or something. It might be.
No, I think
It's about 6 months before cardiology in the young we had shown. Coronary fistulas that are entering into the left heart, what are the special tips that needs to be followed? So it's the title, it's coronary fistulas draining into the left heart. So it was, I will send you shortly.
Okay, then I think this one last.
Guide extension wise, only coils could be used there. I don't think devices.
No, if you are using coils, you have a long MPA catheter. Long MPA catheter is 110 centimeter.
Yes, absolutely.
So that we can use. But for the
10
device, shuttle sheet length is 90 centimeters, and beyond that, it's going to be tough time only. But I'm not sure. Maybe we have to take Shivkumar's point of 8 guide or 9 guide, and then see that.
I don't think 9 guide is available. I hardly seen.
I still don't know.
It used to be available. 15
Correctomy
years
days.
ago, not available.
Correctomy device days.
What is that? Atherectomy device. Directional atherectomy
device.
Carotid sheath has got a length. Carotid sheath up to, I think, I don't know the length, but it's the longest sheath which is available.
Now, why this discussion? Use the axillary approach.
Yeah, I think that's a good solution. I think
What about brachial plexus injury in axillary?
No, nothing happens. Nothing will happen. Don't worry. Nothing.
We routinely use Dr. Praful for all this newborn PDA stentings. Routinely we use it. So in many scenarios when you have difficulty,
In fact,
you can use
in fact, in adult in adult people, they use the axillary approach to put an intra-aortic balloon pump. Short balloon pumps are available. They keep it
There
for
are
15 days.
cases of AVI done through an axillary route. So
Actually, arterial pulse loss is common with the femoral artery rather than axillary artery. I have not seen arterial pulse loss in axillary artery, but femoral in neonates, it's common.
definitely less than what it used
Yeah.
to. I think time is probably 9:18. Probably we should thank everyone for the all active participation here. I think that, as Dr. Praful have told, I think we had more than 300 plus 50 participants here, faculty and the panelists. And then there have been a good amount of overseas delegates. I thank the LifeTech for supporting the program. Any more comments from the panelists or this thing? We can probably wind up our sessions.
Thank you, Edwin, for giving this.
Thank Edwin and Jimmy is also
Next.
there. Let us thank Jimmy also, the
Yeah,
CVRS.
you have been there.
We should thank the CVRS, heartfully thank all this faculty who have come up anyway. And I think it's a wonderful discussion which we had for the last almost 90 minutes plus, with a lot of international people also joining, and we had an international faculty, Dr. Taufik also giving up anyway, joining up wholeheartedly. And this is just a beginning, sir. My own sir is there, Jarangnath sir. Anyway, this is just a beginning only. We have some sessions coming up with the next 2-3 weeks time, and we'll have more of structural and a part of congenital interventions which are quite simplified. So from Cardiovascular Society, along with Mohan sir and Jarvis sir, I thank each and everyone for coming and joining up, especially the moderators, the speakers, the panelists, and more than that, the delegates, and also LifeTech for giving an opportunity. So we sign out, but we'll be back with a very good session. Isn't it, Dr. Edwin?
Yeah, we'll come
Thank
up with
you.
next.
you.
He's coming in next.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you all, please.
Thank
Thank you. Thank you. Manish.